Welcome everyone to the WPI Collective Learning Meeting, peer-to-peer mentoring. This session we have Professor Saeed presenting a working draft of a model he built during his recent cancer treatment. And with no further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Saeed.
Thank you. Hi. Now, you probably know that I have tried to build models of cancer, but in a social and societal context, not in a medical and biological context. So I have looked at the rise of gangs and terrorism, and our newest collaborative attempts has been a metaphoric model of farmers, bandits, and soldiers, which can describe an economy, a firm, a market, or at any level. It's a generic system. Low fidelity doesn't describe everything accurately, but describes a lot of things somewhat in a low fidelity way. I have to admit, I've thought about constructing a model of cancer, but I don't know enough about cancer. And recently, I should mention, I was diagnosed with an early stage of prostate cancer, which is very common, occurs 1 in 6 men. And if caught early, they say that they can mitigate it. And they told me that they caught it early. But in the process, I got to talk to a lot of oncologists at Dana-Farber. And the questions I was asking actually were knowledge elicitation questions. And I must appreciate their patience that they answered me. And at Dana-Farber, I actually told my oncologist that, this is what I have in mind. And he said, wow, that's interesting. We look at silos of information, but we've never looked at this whole system. So the way I built the model was I wanted to get these stocks in order. You recall that in my recent, well, not very recent, last conversation with Forrester, he described how he built the urban dynamics model, and he said, first I got these stocks, and then I tried to understand how the flows occur between them. So instead of going through feedback loops, that's what I did too. I'll share with you all that process and the model. I have a very brief PowerPoint describing the problem. Then I have a live model, and I have tried to build a story to unfold the model. And I use the new version of Stella, and at times I want to shoot myself in the head while I'm using this new version of Stella. It was crazy. But yeah, in the process I learned how to build a story, a new version of Stella also. I'm still learning, and Kareem, I'm going to call and bug you if I run into any problems. Now, as far as the cancer of the body is concerned, broad categories. There is the organ-related version, and within that organ-related version, there is the type which stays within the organ, and then the type which sort of flies out of the organ. And the oncologists, in their lingo, describe, sort of relate them to three animals. There are the turtles, there are the rabbits, and then there are the eagles. So turtles are sort of slow-moving versions which stay within the organs. Rabbits are sort of intermediate growth versions. They don't leave the organ, and eagles fly outside the organ. So these are the organ-related. Then there are system-related cancers which can corrupt the blood cells or can corrupt bone marrow cells. So they are more difficult to deal with. And the way they first try to describe it is that they find out what type it is, how aggressive it is, and what stage it is in. And I've tried to create a generic model. It can describe multiple conditions with low fidelity, none with high fidelity. So that was the starting point. If you want to apply it to a specific situation, there might be some changes needed. There are hypotheses about why it occurs, and no one really knows why. So if you go to the biologists, they would say that the cells have a surface, and there is a programming on the surface which tells the cell how much nutrition to take, how much to grow, and they abide by that programming. And that programming gets corrupted. And they also think that there are certain proteins in the cell membrane which, if those proteins are lost, then the programming really is changed, is corrupted. But again, these are theories. No one knows why that happens. People have attributed this to virus, to diet, to stress, to genetic reasons, but really no one knows for sure. It just happens. I have discussed the various treatments. I've looked at them, and it seems to me that all treatments, like what we do with the social ills, are analogous to pest control. We go after criminals and terrorists, and we try to kill them. It's like pest control, and also cancer in the body, we treat it like pest control. So the treatments are surgery. There is, you take the organ out.
Just to clarify, by that you mean it's sort of, we go after the visible symptoms, but there's an underlying thing that's still generating it.
Yes.
Okay.
So we try to eliminate the visible symptoms, like pest. You kill the pest, but the pest might come back. It's the same approach here. There is chemotherapy, which is like injecting poisons into the body. And there's a lot of collateral damage. I'm using the term from the social systems. But the hope is that, well, there is a recovery from that collateral damage. And in the process, the pest is killed. There are hormone treatments which limit the nutrition to the cancer cells. And they are sometimes used together with the other pest control measures. There is radiation, there is internal radiation, there is external radiation. There are different intensities of radiation. I had long discussions in the beginning. People said, okay, here is our menu of options. Which one do you want? I said, are you crazy? I don't know. You tell me. And after lengthy discussions with, I must appreciate the people at Dana-Farber were very knowledgeable. They sat with me and discussed the options and pros and cons for hours, and then narrowed in on low intensity radiation. So you just go and you lie there, and there's a machine that goes around you, and that's it. So they don't cut you up, and hopefully there are no side effects. But yeah, it's very annoying when you have to do it 44 times. The problems with the treatments are that there is recurrence and there is collateral damage. And these problems are not different from the social version of the ailment, by the way. And there are some recent experimental therapies that I came across when I discussed it with these experts. They are considering nutrition control. My model has a very simple form of nutrition, as I'll show you. In fact, my oncologist also felt that if we could expand on that part, we could investigate the nutrition control options. But model as it is does not address that. Then there is the new one, immunotherapy. in which they strengthen the immune system cells and they go and attack the cancer cells. This is also an experimental stage, and when I asked, hey, to me as a system scientist, this seems like a very good, doable option. They said, it's risky. Once we empower those immune system cells, then sometimes they go wide.
Were you using a system model to analyze the treatment options?
Actually, I'll show you the treatment options that I came across and their performance. And it generally falls in the realm of policy history analysis that we conduct in our models too. So it replicates the experience that they have had.
Quick question. The nutrition therapies, are those cancer specific or are they sort of broad based?
They are cancer specific. Right now, one of the therapies is hormones. They, especially for prostate, they give you some hormones which would block the production of testosterone, and that blocking actually starves the cancer cells more than the healthy cells. And I have a colleague, his wife is an oncologist, and she's a dietitian. And so there are some diet-related interventions too. But I haven't really explored that part because I was reading my model. So my model is based on really my questioning of the experts about specific processes. I got these talks in order, and I could visualize the flows between them. Then my questioning was really, how do these flows happen? And then I sort of translated that into the model and constructed that model. But the reference mode, first of all, problem definition. There are many types of cells and many stalks and many flows. And the business of production and elimination of rogue cells goes on. And the system is in a homeostasis. That is an equilibrium, which is a healthy distribution of cells. So it can be in equilibrium, and I want to first recreate that. Second, a growth can happen, but growth can be contained. In fact, if it hasn't gone wild, and I want the model to show that can happen. Now there is out of control growth in spite of immune system resistance, and by the way, one way they check the possibility, the potential presence of cancer is that they check the level of certain platelets in the body, which are really immune system cells that would attack the rogue cells. And if it's elevated, they suspect that there are rogue cells which are growing. And then they have some other tests to verify and determine a stage. And in many cases, they would do nothing and just watch these days. But if the growth rate is fast, and especially if you look at the rate, then they try to do something. So, as I said, the model, I start with stalks, not with feedback loops, and attempt to draw out the related flows that were based on conversations with these guys that I had on a weekly basis. And inspiration came from my last conversation, my interview with Forrester before he passed away, in which he said, hey, I start with stocks, especially the urban dynamics model. I thought, let me try doing that. Let me take you to the model. So I'll unfold it as a story. I hope we can see all of it. Okay. So these are the three stocks that I started with. There are normal cells, and cancer cells, and immune system cells. Normal cells discharge the normal body function. Cancer cells just grow, they feel they are the only entity, just grow. And immune system cells go after the cancer cells. So in my farmer bandits soldiers analogy, you can see that normal cells would be like farmers, cancer cells are bandits, and immune system cells are soldiers. Here are the flows which I arrived at after talking to all these professionals. The cancer cells can grow, they can replicate themselves, and they can multiply. The normal cells also grow and die, and I aggregated the two rates into one rate. There is some technical stuff that I'll go over, which I think is useful since I teach system dynamics. So I'll bore you a little bit with that. So the change, normal cell population change, is really net change, and they grow towards a goal. Then we'll just discuss what that goal is. Immune system cells also are created and they die, and they grow towards a goal. And we'll discuss how that happens. Some normal cells can lose the proteins or accidentally become rogue cells. So there is a flow from the normal cells to the cancer cells. Likewise, some of the immune cells can also lose the information and go into the rogue category. No one knows how, but well, that happens. And now we look at how these flows change. Now, the normal cell population grows towards a level which I call here indicated normal cells. And it's a stock adjustment process, explicit stock adjustment process. Indicated cells are part of the programming in the cell, and also some element of nutrition determines what are the indicated cells. So actually I had desired normal cells, which is part of the programming, and then these are modulated by nutrition availability. And the nutrition availability depends on demand and supply. Economists would recognize that. The supply is created by normal cells. So normal cells have a function to produce various types of nutrition. These can be hormones, these can be minerals, these can be end-use nutritions. And this sector is very aggregate in the model. It needs to be expanded. And the demand depends on the number of cells and the nutrition demand per cell. So cancer cells create some demand, normal cells would create demand, immune system cells create demand, and then it's all added up here. And that together with supply gives the nutrition availability.
So all cells, normal cells produce and consume.
Normal cells produce, all cells consume.
Right. Okay.
Production is done only by normal cells.
And they all produce, all normal cells produce.
All normal cells produce. Again, this is aggregate model. So you would actually disaggregate this sector and disaggregate the nutrition sector. And that was the view of my oncologists also. I told them this is very accurate, this is to understand the problem.
But just to understand, all cancer cells are produced by converting a normal cell as opposed to replicating a cancer cell. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a growth rate also. So cancer cells grow and replicate themselves.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
And the interesting thing is that while normal cells grow towards a goal, cancer cells have a potential to grow exponentially.
Until they kill somebody.
So,
Until they kill somebody. The cancer cells.
Till the
yeah,
host-
yeah,
The growth has to stop at some point.
yeah. Now, I was, well, first of all, my oncologist said that cancer cells are not affected by nutrition, they just grow. And I said, how can that happen?
Yeah. They need
So
materials.
they eat up normal cells.
Yeah.
So the way I tried to model that was that, of course, their growth is, in absolute sense, is limited by nutrition. I mean, if the body dies, they cannot really grow. But then when there is a low availability of nutrition, they attack the normal cells. They draw them in, they eat them up, and then they replicate themselves. So this flow is influenced by nutrition availability, but in the opposite sense. If the nutrition availability is low, more of these guys are drawn into this stock because they're consumed, and once it's consumed, another cancer cell is replicated.
So that's a feedback effect because the more normal cells you eat, the less you have producing nutrition.
Yeah, there is this, but in the short run, it really supports their growth. And once they have replicated themselves, they can grow exponentially. And then the cancer cells are killed and maimed. And this is normally done by the immune system cells. So I have this immune system health, which is really a function of the immune system cells and cancer cell ratio. And there is a healthy mix, which would allow them to kill these cancer cells. The immune system cells also grow towards a goal, indicated value. And that goal is determined by how many cancer cells are there, and also modulated by the nutrition availability. Now, I mentioned that when they are monitoring you, they check the level of certain platelets in your blood. So if it's elevated, that means there was a greater need there. So the indicated level of the immune system cells is determined by the number of rogue cells that might be available in that system. So I built that in. And these cells, I guess the flow was already there. I just put in the math which determines that flow. So it depends on immune system cells and a fraction consumed by cancer. And this fraction also, in fact, cancer cells would attack immune system cells also if they are short of nutrition. So in the same way that they draw in the normal cells, kill them, and really feed themselves, they can also feed on the immune system cells. And another thing that came up, by the way, and it came up when we discussed the immunotherapy, how can the immune system cells go rogue? And when they go rogue, they start attacking the normal cells and consuming them. pretty much the way the cancer cells attack normal cells and consume them when they're hungry. So in medicine, there are the immune system disorders like lupus, and then there is rheumatic arthritis, and these are immune system disorders. And in this disorder, the immune system cells actually attack the normal cells and consume them. So I put that part in too. And again, it's not clear to me, but tentatively I have this relationship that this disorder is also driven by a nutrition shortage. If the immune system cells are hungry and they're not getting enough nutrition, they'll kill the normal cells. And then I put in some interventions here, and these interventions are the various options that I discussed with my oncologist. And what I'll show you is that this model actually produces the behavior when cancer happens, and also the outcome of the interventions that are in place right now. So let me get out of this story.
I got a quick question. You've got a flow between normal cells and cancer cells that's dependent on the level of normal cells. I would have thought that the dependency would have been on the level of cancer cells driving that flow instead of.
Which one is this?
The flow between normal and cancer cells.
Yeah.
I would have thought that flow would be linked to the level of cancer cells rather than the normal cells.
No, it's just pressure control. It's supposed to be pressure control. So to prevent the flow.
Well, normally some normal cells can lose their intelligence and become rogue cells.
But don't you need a pressure control to have flow equals 0 when there are no normal cells? So you would have to.
Oh yeah, there's first order control. There's the fraction normal cells transformed multiplied by normal cells.
So it's just, it has to be.
Yeah. So you would think about the cancer cells consuming the building blocks out of the normal cells.
So once you have a disturbance and you create cancer cells from whatever source, then they tend to
Cannibalize.
the more there are, the more they feed on themselves, right? I mean, it's
I see.
It's a self-replicating process.
So the more the cancer cells, the more they will eat normal cells.
So you're saying that there should be an arrow in the other direction too?
I think what Fred is saying is that there should be a link from here to this fraction, right? Probably.
Because, I mean, there is kind of a link from cancer cells to normal cell transformation. It just goes through the nutrition demand.
Right.
It's built through nutrition. It's there now implicitly through nutrition. But yeah, that's a good point.
I think Saeed just said that.
It doesn't affect it, but it doesn't affect doesn't reflect the conversion rate, the rate of change from normal cells to cancer cells.
It does when normal cells have grown and they have consumed a lot of nutrition. Then there is a fall in nutrition availability, and that actually through this link, more is drawn in. So actually, the effect comes from, say, cancer cells creating nutrition demand, changing the nutrition availability, and that affecting this flow. So it's there indirectly, but I'll think about a direct connection.
Causally, cancer cells still cause normal.
It does. So that causal effect is there.
I have a question about the flow between normal cells to cancer cells.
Yeah.
So does it imply that it's not just eaten, but actually the normal cells become cancer cells? Is it true?
In fact, both things can happen. normal cells can lose some information on their membrane and become rogue cells. And also, when there are too many cancer cells and there is a nutrition shortage, they can draw in more, eat them up, and use the nutrition to replicate themselves.
So to do this, should there not be an outflow specifically which goes just into the cloud state? That just basically it's like kind of
I thought of that, but then I wanted to minimize the model structure.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is that, yeah, this flow is saying that they draw them in and eat them up and then replicate themselves. So basically it amounts to transforming some of themselves into their own type.
Right, so it's a possible simulation.
So
It speeds up the growth. Then
yeah, it does. And then once they're there, they can grow exponentially.
But I thought where you're going was there's outright death of cells in addition to one-for-one exchange.
But the death of the normal cells.
I considered that, and that would add a lot more structure and have the same effect. So I tried to build models as frugally as possible. So there's a
He's looking at me.
frugal representation.
It's sweet to
Tell
have,
these guys.
you have to bifurcate the cancer cell population.
Yeah, you can expand on it, but in this first version, I wanted a very aggregate behavior. Now, you can simulate this, and this is the homeostasis. Everything's in equilibrium. And why is it in equilibrium? Because, well, I adjusted the parameters to make sure, and I tell you guys, always start your models in equilibrium. That's a very important point of reference. In this case, it also represents the normal healthy condition. There are always some new normal cells being created, always some cells being transformed, always some being killed by the immune system. So it's a dynamic equilibrium.
But is this a cancer-free equilibrium?
This is a dynamic equilibrium. Some cancer cells always exist in the body.
Okay, so
They're under control.
mutated cells that exist.
Now, that's the nice feature of software. If the cancer cells become crazy and start to grow, and I can really change this growth parameter here, and you would see life changes in the behavior. See,
Interesting how much faster the immune cells grow in reference to the cancer cells.
because their number depends on the cancer cells. They're on different scales, by the way.
but they reach a new equilibrium here instead of just going rogue.
It's still under control.
Okay.
And so it's, I think it's quite coincidental that the growth rate somehow corresponded to what they call Gleason scores in case of prostate cancer. I think that was coincidental. Up to a Gleason score of something like 6.6 in this case, they don't worry. If it comes to 0.7, then they start worrying. If it goes beyond 0.7, then so it goes beyond 0.7, and you see this
Yep.
can go out of control.
This is score. Okay. That's the tipping point.
There's a tipping point somewhere.
And what's the time scale?
So
Time scale is in months?
time scale is in months.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I've not calibrated this model.
Is this, prostate cancer is typically very slow growing.
Yeah,
So-
this is a general model. It's a low fidelity model.
Okay. I'm just curious because lately I think some of the articles I've read that are indicating that they would wait now instead of aggressively intervening?
Yes.
Because the timeline may be beyond your lifetime.
Yes. I've been through all those discussions. I think I was very slow in deciding. Some of my family members got frustrated with me. They said, hey, and at one time I told my brother, hey, you want it quickly, you go and get it. I'm going to understand it first.
Report back.
I think a good study of that effect in breast cancer, Ozga Khan in MIT, Ozga, did a lot of her research on breast cancer and those things. So we can put an article up later that shows, I think, a more detailed look of this kind of question of growth and weight that you were asking about. That was her whole dissertation.
Now, I thought I'd do some sensitivity analysis, which, again, I'm understanding in this new software version. But I did some. Well, let me show you. You can do sensitivity analysis, and you can select. Here, this is aggressiveness. That means the rate of growth of the prostate cancer. And it goes from 0.1 to 0.8 in increments. And if I ran this, it shows this is sensitivity analysis with the different increments or whatever it was. So I think I figured out how to do sensitivity analysis, but I'm not going to really dwell on it very much. Did you have a question?
No, it definitely does have what looks like a tipping point, because it's really most of them stay in control until it gets up in that upper range.
Right. Yeah. Now, about the treatments. So I built a little interface here, and I tried to.
We have a question from Kareem.
Yeah.
Should the cancer growth rate be linked to indicated normal cells? In some cancers, I know. Should the cancer growth rate be linked to indicated normal cells? In some cancers, I know the request for more of a needed type of cell is received by both cancer and normal cells, so that the body asks for X cells, but ends up getting some of that as more cancer instead of healthy cells. So the body's saying, I need more, if I'm understanding Kareem correctly, I need more cells, but what I ask for, some are diverted to cancer.
This is there. Now, let me go back to the model. This happens through the nutrition supply. So the body asks for so many normal cells, which are desired normal cells. And since nutrition has been eaten up by cancer cells, there's not enough available, and it gets less. So there's a difference between desired number and indicated number. Indicated number is desired number modulated by the nutrition availability.
My apologies, and that question came from Katrina, not Kareem. I just saw the K and panicked.
So Katrina, I hope you got your answer. So it's there indirectly. It's there. It's happens because of the rationing of nutrition. Now, as far as the treatments are concerned, what I learned is that they take their time and they make exact calculation of how much treatment you need, and they know the outcomes of those treatments. Like in my case, they designed a radiation regime that would kill between 5% and 85% of the bad cells in one session, and they did 44 of those sessions. So average is like 40%. 1 minus 40% is 60% remaining, raised to the power 44, and what you get is 0.0000 something. So I made some calculation, and I think what they did was that per month kill rate is like 99%. So 0.01% is left after first month, and then they do another month, and It's like 0.401 in the end. And that's what the target they're trying to achieve. And they determine it through they take a few weeks calculating and designing.
Is the time for the cell to die when they do the radiation fairly quick relative to the model, that it's pretty much when they do it, the cells die, or does it take a period of time where they die off but could still be consuming nutrition and converting other cells?
You notice that in the cell death rate, I said cells killed and maimed.
Okay.
So some cells are killed instantaneously, others are injured and they die later.
Okay.
So it's both. It happens over some time. In fact, they would 3 months after the treatment, they would do some testing to find out, because before that things are a little bit turbulent.
So at the end of your treatment, how do they know you've achieved that endpoint of the 401 state?
That's what they calculated in the first place.
So it was based on their model of the treatment.
Yes.
Effectiveness.
And it's very interesting. There is this machine, and there is a line of people that comes in, and you are given a barcode, and they take your barcode and scan it, and the machine really brings up your program. And the next person, the machine brings up that program. And so they have made very precise calculations already.
But that's based on they've done some physiological modeling.
Oh, yes. It took many months to determine the stage.
This is for you.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was listening to a presentation yesterday for hemophiliacs, and they do something similar for how they determine dosing. It's interesting. I was thinking about modeling, do some modeling in that space. We can talk about that later.
Right. So in fact, I know nothing about the biology, but I know how they determine the doses, and they're pretty certain about those doses. Now, in some cases, they combine various therapies like hormones and radiation, chemo and radiation. In my case, they thought just radiation is enough.
But there's no injectable chemicals that sort of concentrate in the prostate area as attractors for the radiation treatment, by the way, in this case?
The most common accompanying treatment is what we call the hormone therapy, which limits the production of testosterone. So the cells are already starved, and then they attack them. Mm-hmm. In other instances, they might choose chemo. But I don't think there is technology that would say, okay, gather here, then we'll shoot you.
Right.
So you were asking if there's a way for the cells to be concentrated, or are you sort of targeting the radiation?
Well, in other words, having something that attaches to cancer cells that increases the sort of the target size for radiation or effectiveness.
Well, they probably have a model of the. I mean, it's still they're not radiating you globally in a large area. It's pretty.
It's small. Actually, they reduce the whole prostate to scar tissue.
Okay, yeah, because I know somebody that's working on some protein beam therapies. Those are pretty focused, like if you have some kind of tumor in your brain or something like that. Yeah. But they're actually actively imaging you in 3D while they're doing the imaging and trying to point. You control the pointing of the beam because it's devastating to the tissue. It causes collateral damage.
And the way they avoid the collateral damage is that there are many beams, and they focus on the target.
Yeah.
So when they're passing through the body, in fact, they're very weak. Only when they focus, that's the strong point. And also, they rotate the beams around the target.
And, but they don't differentiate healthy prostate cells from, do they?
No, they cannot. So this
You have to drop big.
So
So it's they're through radiation they're excising the prostate. You said they turn off the scar. They turn the scar tissue.
right. So this thing rotates around it,
Okay.
and this whole thing is reduced to scar tissue.
Okay.
So they use the blood test primarily as a diagnostic, just to determine how likely to go.
They use PSA.
Yeah.
They use PSA and actually both the absolute value and the rate of change of PSA gives them some idea.
So what happens in the model when you run the treatment?
Yes.
Oh.
So you run, say, 99% is killed per month, and what happened?
Do you need to enter on that thing? For it to accept the new value?
It's not doing what I did, we just did in the room. So there's a treatment start time, which is 10th month, and treatment.
So it says reset all parameters.
So let's reset
These are two shocking.
and run this.
There you go. Is that what you're looking for?
No, but I think cancer growth fraction was like 60%. And yeah. So it runs, it kills here and then it comes back. And this was one question I asked my oncologist that, it can grow back. And he said what happens is that actually the growth rate, the cells are maimed and they cannot even grow.
Mm-hmm.
So growth rate is also reduced by, say, something like 90% or something. I'll just put in a number here.
It's almost like it's one of those fisheries industries models where the density of the fish stock drops below a certain amount. It can't repopulate itself.
Right. Again, it's not doing what I wanted to do.
Or you reset and do both.
Okay. Yes. I just had to click it somewhere. So that's the outcome that they're expecting. That the population is reduced to where it's supposed to be, and again there is a healthy homeostasis.
But this is kind of like taking the stray dogs and figuring out how to kill enough dogs quickly enough, not let new ones in, so that the population resets at a lower level rather than getting rid of the food.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, another way, which is experimental, is let me revert this and let's first run the model with the ailment. This is the changing the immune system. So if you change the immune system potency, that means an immune system cell can kill more cells. So I changed that potency by, say, 20%. And again, it occurs at time 10 and doesn't stop because, once it's changed. Can you notice that there's a dramatic effect and there's a change towards restoration of the healthy homeostasis
Is it returning? It looks like it's still returning at slightly above the original equilibrium. Is that just a factor of the model, or is that intended that it's okay to be a little bit above, as long as it's not at that tipping point?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the body can take various levels of rogue cells, control them, as long as it's under control here. It's okay.
Yeah, I had a friend who just actually had cancer, and so he had some metastasized, some tumors grow, and they were going over his treatment options. And one of the, I didn't hear this cost, he mentioned it, that they didn't want to remove some of the tumors probably because of the nutrition thing. Just those tumors, the ones you have, if we can control those, they in themselves are controlling growth of other tumors.
Mm-hmm.
So you remove the one that's noticeable, all of a sudden you allow these other ones to start propagating and proliferating.
It's pretty complex. So let's change this to say 30%. Yeah. Not too much difference. You could possibly run a sensitivity. And again, the problem here is those immune system cells can go out of control. That's the point.
So there's about 5 minutes left in the session. Where do you see this model going?
I think that, well, first of all, it helped me understand what I was going through, and it gave me some confidence in the efficacy of the treatments that they were proposing. And I think since the causes of the cells going rogue are not known, it can help devise a decent treatment regime.
Yeah. That's kind of, the people who are doing work in the company I work for, is not what using this type of technique. I think this would be a really nice technique. But they're looking at trying to do some modeling, based on the data and stuff like that, for decision making, but they're not doing it at a system level. They're doing it kind of empirically. They're looking at things, using their brain, like think about the system relationships, but they haven't actually modeled them.
Yep.
They're inferring them.
Right.
And so that start writing down, then you can play out some of the combinations and see which ones.
So how are they modeling it?
Well, for example, they're doing correlations, data correlations. I do this, I see some tendency towards this thing, so maybe if I do more of that, then it doesn't equally work in humans. But they do like pharmacokinetic studies. I mean, they do a lot of studies on the effect of these drugs on the body, or how fast the body, the rate of metabolisms and stuff like that. So they build up some mathematical models. I'm not real familiar with what they're doing, but I think that did you see Jim Rogers' presentation about
No, I didn't.
I just got a paper here. He talked about at Mayo Clinic they were chasing the hemoglobin levels, and so he said, well, you basically how do you get back to homeostasis? Basically, how do you stabilize the dosing regimen and stuff like that?
And this was for dialysis.
Dialysis patients, yeah. And then Ken did theirs, and I can't recall the output, what were the nut was for theirs, what they came up with, but that was about the modeling HIV, and then allowed them to think about, where do you put it in your policies like that.
So are you still talking with your doctors and sharing this with them?
Yeah, I have to see him, I guess, every month now.
So he brings his reports and you bring your model?
I'm sure.
Has he asked for credit on the paper?
I'll be happy to do that.
Get a discount for that?
Paper brought to you by. Are there any more questions from the field while we have a few more minutes left? Any final questions? And while they're...
I would think you could actually extend this and include a model for symptoms or indicators.
That's the thing. If you could tie in early people like to tie in. You have some more opportunities with your biomarkers. You can start tying in other sources of data to model the trending of the human, right? So there's somebody that I read about that wanted to study humans for 25 or 30 years and build a massive data correlator so that he could say, I know where you're going. And so that's similar to that. Again, of course, we talked with Kaiser. That was, you know, he says he sees people do disease progression through the treatment codes. And he says because they've got basically they've got control of the whole system. The people don't come into the system and leave the system, so they basically have ability to look at them across they basically they're tagged. So you watch these things flow through the environment, and you can say, I know what to do. It doesn't know how to like interpret it, make sense out of it, make decisions, policies around it. So it was pretty interesting conceptually that he wants to do something in space. But he's an IT guy. He builds data correlates, big data stuff, big data engines.
What was the response? You mentioned earlier silos of information. What was the response of putting all the information into one model like this and kind of making it visual?
Oh, from the oncologist?
Yeah.
He thought, yeah, it's a great idea. He actually took the flow diagram from me. That's what he could understand. He said he showed to his colleagues at Harvard Med. I don't know if he did or not. These guys are very busy.
Yeah. Busy. Well, they got a line of people with barcodes, and that's how fast they move it. It's got to be a lot.
Well, that's the way they get reimbursed these days.
Well, we'll go ahead and if there's any other questions, any final comments you have?
Thank you. Here is another manifestation of farmers, bandits, soldiers.
Yeah.
And a wonderful area with great potential to apply it into.
Well, thank you, Professor Saeed, and everyone else, both in here and online. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.